Refugee haunted by the past.
A scam.
Leave all the negotiating to me.
And an ice cream van. That! Where the Buffalo Roam. Comedy for Monday, 8:30 on BBC1.
Private Eye Kim Paris gets too close for comfort to the prime suspect in a brutal murder case. True Betrayal is the film on BBC2 shortly.
To commemorate the 50th anniversary of VJ Day, Sue Lawley returns with News 45. News 45 in half an hour.
First on BBC1, tonight's main evening news at 9 o'clock with Michael Burke.
Japan's Prime Minister has finally made a clear and public apology for what his country did in the war. But veterans marking half a century since the war ended say it's not enough. They want compensation. Standpipes in the streets as water companies say they'll have to cut supplies if it doesn't rain. And the girl with somebody else's heart launches the Transplant Games and the campaign for 1 million donors. Good evening. 50 years to the day after Japan surrendered and brought World War II effectively to an end, her Prime Minister went on national television to apologise for what his country had done. Mr. Tomoichi Murayama's statement had apparently been cleared by all three parties of the ruling coalition. In it, he spoke of deep remorse and offered his heartfelt apologies for the damage and suffering that Japan had caused. He ruled out any further compensation, though, and some veterans say the apology was still a personal rather than an official one.
At the official remembrance ceremony here, Emperor Akihito, speaking before an immense bank of yellow and white chrysanthemums, expressed his condolences for those on all sides who lost their lives in the war, which his father, Emperor Hirohito, had launched, and said he hoped the pain of that time would never be repeated. At this formal ceremony, neither the Emperor nor the Prime Minister spoke of apologising. That was dealt with at a televised news conference Mr. Murayama gave earlier, at which he referred specifically to the suffering of British POWs.
I've often heard of their bitterness, and when I wrote to Mr. Major, I wanted to take the opportunity to apologise to all the victims of the war, including the POWs.
That goes significantly further than any previous Japanese leader has towards satisfying the POW's demands. But there's confusion over whether Mr. Murayama was speaking in his own name as Prime Minister or on behalf of the whole cabinet, which, like the country, is deeply divided over Japan's war record. As he spoke, right-wing cabinet ministers defied his wishes and attended ceremonies at a shrine where convicted war criminals are honoured. And even Mr. Murayama made clear his apology didn't mean Japan would pay the POW's compensation. Philip Short, BBC News, Tokyo.
For veterans here, the start today of the commemorations to mark the end of the war. Those who didn't return to a Britain at peace, remembered by their colleagues in various towns and cities with customary dignity. But there's still concern about the sincerity of the Japanese Prime Minister's apology.
At the moment, there doesn't appear to be any real expression of regret behind what he said. I feel it's come from one person to another and leave my nation out of it.
Each of the 250,000 balloons released at a ceremony in Portsmouth represented a British life lost during the Second World War. The fight for compensation for victims of Japanese atrocities, veterans' organisations made clear today, will continue, however contrite Japan's government may now be. This commemoration in London mirrored Japanese sensitivity over the war. The Japanese corporation, which now owns County Hall, at first said it couldn't take place. A compromise allowed 2 representatives to lay wreaths at the memorial inside, particularly symbolic on this day for Bert Reeves, who recited the epitaph of the Burma fallen. For your tomorrow, we gave our today.
Those words mean quite a lot to us, and I felt the lump coming up in my throat when I said them. Especially the atmosphere of being at memorial once again. And it brings back poignant memories of Burma and things like that, and friends I knew who I know no more.
There will never be another anniversary to match this. But even as they marched in Coventry, the city that symbolises reconciliation with Germany, it's unclear whether the same degree of reconciliation will ever be achieved with Japan. Mike Wooldridge, BBC News.
Only one of today's ceremonies brought Allied and Japanese veterans together. And even at that ceremony, on the bridge over the River Kwai, many of the Allies chose not to meet their old enemies. The bridge was part of what became known as the Railway of Death between Thailand and Burma. The Japanese army forced about 35,000 Allied prisoners of war and 150,000 Asian workers to construct the railway. In the process, about 16,000 POWs and 100,000 Asians died. From there, Neil Bennett reports.
These days, the train has to ease its way through tourists as it crosses the bridge on the River Kwai. It carries mainly sightseers and commuters to and from Bangkok, 80 miles away. The original bridge, which the Japanese built to take munitions and supplies, was destroyed by Allied bombers in 1945. The Burma-Thailand Railway cost the lives of 16,000 POWs and 100,000 native labourers. In place of the makeshift graves, those who died are now commemorated in the war cemetery in the small town of Kanchanaburi, where a brief and simple ceremony was held. The lives of 2 British and 1 Japanese veteran looking on were changed forever by their wartime experience.
The events being remembered here have created plenty of myths, but some of the things which have happened since are almost stranger than fiction.
Takashi Nagase was an interpreter for the Japanese equivalent of the Gestapo and witnessed many acts of torture. He built his own temple at the River Kwai and returned many times as his own personal act of atonement.
I can't stand that horrible scene. So I swear myself to come again and pay homages to save my soul.
British POW Trevor Dakin emigrated to Canada after the war, but 9 years ago came to live near the River Kwai, the very scene of his suffering.
It was a ghost and it laid it to rest. It's gone now, and I don't have any nightmares at all now. I was still having them before I came here, but they've gone now.
The request for Japanese visitors to stay away from the cemetery while local school children laid flowers reflected the bitterness still felt by many, but not all, of the Allied veterans.
When I first went home, I had hatred in my heart. It went slowly, and I hope that before they die, the others will feel the same way.
This was a day of commemoration for men who have found reconciliation with former enemies. Others haven't been able to cope with the past in the same way. Neil Bennett, BBC News, at the River Kwai in Thailand.
The deadline set by Kashmiri militants threatening to kill 4 foreign hostages unless their demands were met has now passed. The kidnappers want 15 Kashmiris being held in Indian prisoners to be released. A note found on Sunday on the dead body of a 5th hostage, Hans Christian Ostro, said there'd be more deaths unless the Indian government responded within 2 days.
The body of Hans Christian Ostro began its journey back to civilization from this remote mountain police station on Sunday. The lives of the 4 hostages still being held by Mr. Ostro's killers will not be bargained for by the Indian authorities. They're still hoping to persuade the militants to release the remaining hostages despite their deadline. And the ambassadors of the countries involved are still urging restraint. Indian forces who've been giving security cover for a major Hindu pilgrimage through the region where the remaining 4 men are being held are continuing to withdraw, although there's increasing pressure for them to take action to find the militants and try to rescue the hostages. Tomorrow, Srinagar will be closed by a general strike called by a coalition of secessionist groups opposed to the killing of the Norwegian hostage.
We believe that this is against the essence of the Kashmiri movement, against the essence of Islam, and that's why every group, every party in the Village Conference feels strongly against this inhuman act. And it has been decided that on the 16th of August, the Freedom Conference has given a call for the people of the valley to observe a strike.
The strike call is an unprecedented gesture by those Kashmiris who believe that kidnapping and murder harm their cause. The kidnappers are becoming increasingly isolated from ordinary Kashmiris, the very people their actions are supposed to be helping. In Delhi, the Indian Prime Minister used the occasion of Indian Independence Day to blame Pakistan for Mr. Ostro's death because of Pakistan's continued support for militancy on the Indian side of the disputed Kashmir border. In Srinagar, the governor and other senior security officials involved in the hostage crisis were on hand at an Indian Independence Day celebration. But the ceremony was pointedly ignored by many Kashmiris who do not celebrate Indian independence, but want Kashmiri independence from India. David Loyne, BBC News, Srinagar.
A British man kidnapped in Colombia has been found murdered. Trevor Catton, an engineering student who lived in Colombia, was seized at his parents' home in June. His body was found in the town of Caqueza, south of the capital, Bogotá. Here, Tony Blair's leadership of the Labour Party has again been criticised by one of his own backbenchers. Ronnie Campbell, the MP for Blythe Valley in Northumberland, accused him of trying to con the electorate by adopting Thatcherite ideas. The Conservatives have been quick to exploit the latest attack. Our political correspondent Lance Price reports.
This is the mid-morning phone-in, joined this morning by Ronnie Campbell, Labour MP for Blythe Valley.
He's hard left, working class and closer in politics and temperament to Arthur Scargill than Tony Blair. In normal times, his criticism of the leadership might go unnoticed. But on top of other recent attacks from a minority of MPs, his words have given Mr Blair cause for concern. Mr Campbell accused him of tearing the heart out of the Labour Party and trying to con southern voters.
It seems to me that Tony's ignoring the grassroots of the Labour Party, the people who are members of the Labour Party, the people who decide what policies should be and should not be.
By accusing Tony Blair of concentrating power in the hands of unelected advisers, Mr Campbell was echoing the words of his more moderate colleague Richard Burden, who last week said it was a style of leadership that should have gone out with the Berlin Wall. Today it fell once more to Mr Blair's deputy to deflect the row.
One thing for sure, it's not a central Eastern European control system, is it, if everybody's saying it? What we're actually doing is that they will make their points. They're independent members of Parliament, but what we're doing is leaving you to make a judgment and putting our case for Labour.
Ronnie Campbell this very morning accusing his leader of trying to con the electorate. You haven't actually heard me use such violent language against Mr Blair.
Tony Blair expected his uncompromising style of leadership to ruffle a few feathers. Indeed, squeals of protest from the likes of Mr Campbell could actually help him by distancing New Labour in the public's mind from the old hard left. It only becomes a problem when, as in the past week, that seriously damages the party's own efforts to get its campaigning message across. Lance Price, BBC News, Westminster.
South West Water today became the second water company to apply for drought orders. It wants to extract more water from 2 rivers and reduce the flow to rivers from 2 reservoirs. Yorkshire Water, the first to apply for drought orders, has set up more than 200 standpipes in Bradford and says unless there's some heavy rain soon, they'll have to be used.
Yorkshire Water emerged onto the streets with the starkest warning yet that water in Bradford is running out. 250 standpipes were erected. As many as 13,000 others will follow if the crisis continues. As the standpipes went up, so did the tension, as this angry customer turned on an official of Yorkshire Water.
Are you testing by cutting the water off?
No, madam, no.
Is that a promise?
Yes, it is. Yes,
because
it is.
if not, I'll have your guts for garters.
No, the water is not being cut off. That's the most important thing to realise. We're only testing what we...
Ill feeling against the water company is growing. Its admission that it loses 100 million gallons a day from leaky pipes, fueling customers' anger.
If we don't see some serious reduction in demand from our customers over the next few weeks, then the deployment of standpipes becomes a reality. And what we're really trying to encourage our customers to do is to conserve water as much as possible over the next few weeks.
Nowhere is the sense of frustration greater than in Bradford's 200 old people's homes. Social service officials have asked Yorkshire Water for special help. Nothing has been promised. Water is in big demand here. Washing machines are in action constantly. Incontinence and risk of infection are ever present.
People just think as water as a cup of tea, a flush of the toilet, a quick wash before you go to work. In our case, it's a lot more than that. It's a priority, is water to us. We need it 24 hours a day.
Not to be used at the present time,
But it will be in as little as a fortnight if Yorkshire Water's calculations are accurate. And if, or when it is, it'll be the vulnerable who'll suffer most. Richard Wells, BBC News, Bradford.
6 Greenpeace activists have been detained in China following an anti-nuclear protest in Beijing. During the brief demonstration in Tiananmen Square, the activists unfurled a banner protesting against Chinese nuclear testing. They were promptly arrested by the Chinese authorities. 2 cameramen were also held. All have since been released. A hurricane has forced the government of Bermuda to postpone the colony's referendum on independence until tomorrow. The vote was supposed to be held today, but Hurricane Felix stopped most islanders from leaving their homes. Rebel fighters in the breakaway Republic of Chechnya have promised that they'll start laying down their weapons tomorrow, in line with a recently signed military agreement with Russia. The Russian President Boris Yeltsin had threatened to take further military action in Chechnya if the agreement was not honoured. Here, children are to get their own patient's charter, setting standards for maximum waiting times for first appointments. Under the new proposals, hospitals will be expected to provide separate areas for children in casualty units and places where they can play. They're being tried out in a hospital in the Prime Minister's constituency of Huntingdon.
Holly Ward at Hinchingbrook Hospital in Huntingdon, where the draft charter for children is to be put through its paces. It gives parents the right to keep their children's health records and places a duty on staff to tell parents how to contact services available to them, both in the hospital and in the community.
Oh dear, what have you done?
The new charter also requires hospitals to set minimum waiting times for children's first appointments and build separate areas in casualty for youngsters.
With a newer hospital like ourselves, it's very much easier to utilise the resources that we've already got. With an older hospital, geographically, they weren't built with the specialised groups in mind.
While many hospitals already work to these standards, some would find the charter difficult to implement, especially as the government has ruled out any extra cash.
For us, the changes won't cost us very much, but I think when children are nursed in other hospitals as they are, on adult wards, then it may be quite costly to bring in the changes that's in the new charter.
Whether people know what their rights are under the patient's charter, many critics claim it's fueled a boom in complaints by raising unrealistic expectations. Supporters, however, believe it's helped focus minds on patients' needs and provided a measure against which to judge performance. As part of that process, the government is cutting maximum waiting times for all patients in A&E to 2 hours from next April. Specialists in children's health have welcomed the draft, but say it needs to go further.
There are areas that need to be developed. For example, in accident and emergency services, whilst having a separate area, we also need appropriate staff and appropriate facilities for children.
The government says it's aiming to set standards which are challenging and achievable. The service and other interested groups now have until the end of October to send in their thoughts on whether this draft charter goes far enough. Richard Hannaford, BBC News at Hinchingbrook Hospital.
Police investigating the murder of 15-year-old Louise Sellers say she was strangled with a nylon rope. Louise's body was found near Wigan, and the Greater Manchester Police Authority has offered a reward of £20,000 to help catch her killer. Her mother today made an appeal to the public for information.
As the search went on for clues, Greater Manchester Police were investigating the theory that 15-year-old Louise Sellers may have died after accepting a lift in a car. The body of Louise, described as a spirited but conscientious girl, was found in a copse 5 miles from her home in Apley Bridge. Today, at a news conference in Wigan, Louise's mother made an emotional appeal for public help with the police investigation.
Louise was a loving, beautiful child, and I know we'll never get over her loss. She was a teenager, but she was my baby. And please, if anyone knows anything, who can give any information to the police, please get in touch with them because he needs to be caught.
Louise was found with head injuries and a length of blue rope, possibly towing rope, around her neck. She disappeared after bidding farewell to friends at Randall's Corner, a local meeting place for teenagers.
I'm looking for anybody who knows her, who was at the scene of Randall's Corner, or anybody who was in the vicinity to come forward and tell us.
Louise was a strong, athletic girl, a promising runner who, her mother said, would have resisted any threat from a stranger. She said she would only accept a lift from someone she knew. Mike Mackay, BBC News, Wigan.
A hospital trust has been fined £14,000 after a severely handicapped woman drowned in her bath at a nursing home in Weymouth. Margaret Smallwood died last November after being left alone while her care worker prepared Sunday lunch. Dorset Community NHS Trust admitted failing to ensure her safety.
The Gables was Margaret Smallwood's permanent home. Last November, a member of staff there ran her a bath and helped her in. But instead of staying with her, she propped the bathroom door open and continued with her other duties, which included making Sunday lunch for staff and patients. Miss Smallwood's body was found face down in 6 inches of water. She was 39 when she died. Physically and mentally handicapped, she couldn't speak and had been in care since the age of 6. Miss Smallwood's mother said she'd complained about staffing levels at the home a year before her daughter's death. She's convinced that the staff were so overworked they couldn't look after her properly.
That was the cause of what happened, really, the fact that the care assistant had to cook the lunch and look after my daughter, and she omitted to look after Margaret while she went to prepare lunch. And if she hadn't have had to do that, she might have not left her alone like she did.
Today at Weymouth Magistrates Court, Dorset Community NHS Trust admitted failing to ensure Miss Smallwood's safety and was fined £14,000. The Trust's solicitor said everything was being done to make sure such a tragedy wouldn't happen again. Joe Paley, BBC News.
Shopkeepers have accused the government of creating a recipe for confusion in the latest changeover to metric weights. In 6 weeks' time, it'll be illegal to sell packaged food in pounds and ounces. But the law doesn't apply to food that's not pre-packed.
From October the 1st, pre-packed food like meat, cheese and vegetables will have to be sold in kilos. The old imperial measures will be consigned to the small print. After Metrication Day, shops will no longer be able to advertise this pork joint, for example, as costing £1.79 a pound. Supermarkets are already preparing their customers for the change. After October the 1st, it'll still be possible to buy food like these tomatoes in pounds and ounces, provided they're loose. But the same food pre-packaged must be sold in grams and kilograms. Failure to comply will be a criminal offence, punishable by a fine of up to £5,000. Widespread customer confusion is predicted as shoppers try to compare prices per pound for loose food with prices per kilo for the pre-packed variety. The Summerfield supermarket chain has put calculators and conversion tables on its trolleys to help customers. But it's not so easy for the small shop. Diane Brandon runs the village store at Ufcombe in Devon. She says she'd rather go to jail than give up pounds and ounces.
It's just going to confuse people. The prices are going to seem ridiculously high. Instead of something like 99p a quarter for some roast beef, it'll be £8.72 a kilogramme. And they're going to immediately think the price has gone up an awful lot.
Knowing there are 454 grams in a pound will be useful, but many people are still unsure.
No, it is 1,000.
No, it's not. And 454, is it?
Are there 1,000? I really don't know. Everything's in metric that I've just bought, and I haven't a clue.
When you first go shopping after D-Day, you may find the new price ticket a bit of a puzzle.
When Britain converted to decimal coinage in 1971, there was a big awareness campaign, but there's been little publicity for Metrication Day. The government denies it's trying to sneak the change through.
There's nothing secret about it, but at the same time, it would be wrong to raise false alarms about it. It's only a continuation of a process that has been going on for more than 20 years.
In the big supermarkets, metrication will not mean higher prices, but there's already evidence that unscrupulous traders elsewhere are using the change, demanded under European law, to push prices up. Greg Wood, BBC News.
Warwickshire will be making their third successive appearance in the NatWest final against Northamptonshire at Lord's next month. Both semi-finals were one-sided, with Warwickshire bowling out Glamorgan at Cardiff for only 86, going on to win by 8 wickets. The other semi-final at Headingley was marred by crowd trouble. Police arrested 15 people after a series of scuffles. Yorkshire have promised an inquiry. On the field, Yorkshire failed in their run chase and lost to Northants by 87 runs. The 10th World Transplant Games have begun in Manchester. 1,000 competitors who've all had organ transplants are taking part in the competition, which is hoped will encourage more people to become organ donors.
Like all the competitors here, Vicky Wombwell from Newcastle is living proof of the success of transplant surgery, one of the great medical advances of recent years. She has a kidney donated by her mother in an operation 2 years ago.
I mean, it's very nice that parents and family are able to give the kidneys, and it's very special when they do. But for other people, it's not possible to get them off the parents or the family, so carrying your donor card is very important.
Among the spectators was Christian Barnard, the South African surgeon who performed the world's first heart transplant in 1967.
I'm really very grateful that in some way I was part of making this possible, and it gives me a tremendous amount of pleasure to see that what we predicted right at the beginning, that patients who've had transplant won't be invalids, but they would be able to live a very normal life, that this prediction has become true.
There are more than 6,000 people in the UK needing a transplant, and every year about 150 die while on the waiting list. Demand for donated organs is way in excess of their supply. For example, since a peak of 1,874 kidney transplants in 1990, the number of operations has levelled out, while the number of patients waiting for a transplant continues to rise, now topping the 5,000 mark. 13-year-old Ben Schneider has a rare condition which means his body can't cope properly with proteins, and he gets easily tired. He has no appetite and must note down everything he eats.
I've also got the hula hoops that I haven't put in.
At night he's drip-fed, but a kidney and liver transplant would change that.
I'll be able to go swimming, stay at my friend's, stay at my grand's house, go camping, be able to come off some of the medicines.
Lead a normal life?
Yeah.
The youngest competitor in the Transplant Games is 16-year-old Kelly Wormsley from Lancashire, who had a heart transplant 4 years ago. It's hoped such medical success stories will help recruit another 1 million potential organ donors. As Britain celebrated winning gold in the first event of the Games, volleyball, the organisers have appealed to those already with a donor card to join the NHS Organ Donor Computer Register, which already carries 1.7 million names. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, Manchester.
And the main news again. 50 years to the day after Japan surrendered, its Prime Minister offered his heartfelt apologies, but he ruled out compensation for former prisoners of war. Newsnight is on BBC2 at 10:30, but from the 9 o'clock news, good night.
Good evening. The main stories from Look North. Police are warning that a growing number of youngsters on Humberside are becoming addicted to a deadly form of pure heroin. Detectives have launched their third investigation into a drugs-related death after a 16-year-old was found collapsed in a flat.
The flats on Hull's Orchard Park estate have gained a damning reputation. The death of Patrina Harris this week has simply reinforced what most residents already knew. The teenager is thought to have died from an overdose of heroin, a drug used by increasing numbers of young people on the estate, some just 12 years old. With a new type of pure heroin, though, now being sold in the city, Humberside police fear many teenagers are unaware of its strength and potential danger.
They experiment with lethal cocktails. They've no idea about the purity of the drugs that they're taking, and they've no idea about the level of contamination that they're putting into their bodies.
Residents on the Orchard Park estate have now called for direct action to help tackle the drugs problem. Without it, they fear the lives of more young people will certainly be lost.
West Yorkshire police say a change in the way they deal with burglaries is reducing crime. In the first 6 months of this year, 9,000 fewer crimes were reported than in the same period last year.
The weather strip off.
Another burglary to add to the statistics and for officers in Huddersfield to try and solve. But a wrecked summer holiday for Patrick Major and his family with irreplaceable items stolen.
You can spend a fortune, and if they're going to get in, I suppose everybody thinks, well, they're going to get in whatever you do. You do the best you can, and you just hope that that's good enough.
What we're seeing for the first 6 months of this year is an actual reduction in the level of reported crime, and we're very pleased with that.
Security is still said to be the best deterrent, but even then, that's not always enough.
The North Yorkshire trainer Mark Johnston is celebrating tonight after winning a magnificent treble at the Ebor meeting in York. Bijou Dand, Tyler and Double Eclipse streaked to victory this afternoon. Double Eclipse was the highlight of the Johnston Bonanza, winning the Lonsdale Stakes by a clear 2 lengths, having led most of the way. His victory confirmed the treble and will almost certainly mean the horse will go for the St Leger.
We've had trebles before, but not at places like this. It's quite incredible. You know, I think probably today we'd have said Double Eclipse was always going to be our best chance. Having had a double, it seemed too much to hope for before the race, but it's great to have done it now.
Double Eclipse was beaten at Goodwood, but only by his elder brother. Today's victory was a definite crowd pleaser. With record attendance expected tomorrow, they'll be hoping for more of the same. Cricket and Yorkshire's hopes of reaching their first Lord's final in 8 years have been dashed. They were well beaten by Northamptonshire in the NatWest Trophy semi-final at Headingley. Northants made 286 for 5 in 60 overs. Yorkshire were all out for 199. Well, that's all from Look North tonight, but we'll be back with breakfast bulletins from 6:25 tomorrow morning. But from all of us here, good night.
A very good evening to you. It's been another dry and sunny day across many parts of the country, so I'm afraid the drought continues, not just through the rest of this week, but right the way through the weekend too, and that's at least, I think it could go into next week as well. In fact, it's been the driest summer since our records began in 1727, and we've only got 2 weeks of the summer left as far as we're concerned, and as I say, there's no rain in the offing just at the moment. Now, there's been a little bit of drizzle on that cloud in the far north, and some cloud will push back onto these western coasts as we go through the night. But most places dry, a few mist patches in the east, a sticky night too. Now, that mist will clear away pretty quickly tomorrow, and then over eastern Scotland, eastern parts of England, central and southern areas, a lot of sunshine right from the word go. We're going to have some cloud really over North Wales, the Cumbrian coast, up into western Scotland, through the Forth and Clyde valleys too, up into the far north. Now, most of that will clear away and break up to give some sunshine, although I think in the far north we could keep it windy, cloudy, and could be the odd spot of drizzle now and again. It's going to be hotter than today in many places, 30, 31 degrees, that's close on 90 degrees Fahrenheit, but refreshing sea breezes around the coasts. In fact, on the western side, it is going to be pleasantly warm, but with the temperatures rising further east, it looks as though with the humidity coming up as well, it is going to become uncomfortably hot and humid, and that's likely to last right the way through the rest of the week, although the sea breezes near the east coast particularly could make it feel a lot better. High pressure then dominating the scene, as you can see, for the rest of the week, so hardly any change, a lot of dry weather, a lot of sunshine, the temperatures gradually lifting too, and gradually brightening up, I think, in the north. That's it from me. Bye for now.
On You Decide tonight,
should the state cut back support to single mothers, feckless young women, or defenceless lone mums? One-parent families are under fire again. But what do you think? In the last of his current debates, Jeremy Paxman says, the choice is yours.
you can vote on this subject now. If you want to vote yes, phone now on 0891 44 7701. If you want to vote no, phone now on 0891 44 7702. Lines are open now and for the next 15 minutes. Find out the result tonight when You Decide.
In half an hour on BBC1, a drama telling the true story of former Japanese prisoner of war Eric Lomax as he confronts the nightmare of 50 years ago. First on BBC1, also marking VJ Day, Sue Lawley today.
We all have our secret horrors.